The board meeting ended roughly an hour ago, so we want to thank both you, Rod Beckstrom, and you, Peter Dengate Thrush, for talking to us, helping us get a feel for the actions of the board and help summarize what those actions were. Peter, let's start with you. It was widely thought that the ICANN board would finally approve the launch of new generic top-level domains at this meeting. Yet again, much to the dismay of many of your own community members, that didn't happen. Why?
Well, look, we're talking about the live running internet and making very dramatic changes to it, and that's something we're going to do right rather than fast. We've had a lot of concern from members of the community, including governments of the world, that there's still some concerns that they want sorted out before we go live. Now, the only responsible thing for us to do in the face of that message from our community that there are still matters of concern is to come up with a process for looking at that and resolving it. And we've done that. We've arranged a meeting with the governments in February, which will hopefully resolve their remaining issues. But I think most of the community is very pleased. We've actually closed off or signalled the closing off of a whole lot of issues which they can now put behind them as settled. And the fact that we're closing in on the remaining issues and that we've got a process for dealing with those with the governments, I think the reaction I've had since the meeting is that most people are pleased with the progress we've made.
Let me follow up to that. The decision of the board not to move forward with the launch of new GTLDs occurred against a backdrop of ICANN having received a very critical letter from the U.S. Department of Commerce. How big of a factor was that in the board's decision to kick this down the road?
Well, that was one of the comments that came in as part of the community comments in relation to the new GTLD program. That's a feature of the way ICANN does things. We put material out for comment and the comment comes back. When it comes back, of course, we then have to take it very seriously, and that's what we're doing. That's going to be part of the process as we move forward to that meeting in February, considering those issues and looking at the materials, looking at the community response, and eventually making a proper decision on that.
Peter, will the February meeting be open?
Well, we haven't actually resolved the rules of engagement with the GAC on this particular meeting, but the standard position for all organisations in ICANN is that they are open. That's part of our commitment to transparency and part of our accountability obligations. On the other hand, if there's at any point that one of the parties thinks that the negotiation would be assisted by a period of discussing things in private, I guess we could consider that.
Your GAC seems to be saying to the board, we've been talking. You want our input, we've been giving you our input. You say you're listening to us, but at the end of the day, you make decisions that seem to indicate you didn't hear us at all. Is there a breakdown here?
No, but look, I think that is a feature of ICANN. We get public comment from an enormous range of institutions and people, and we think we could probably do a better job of explaining our decisions. And so one of the things we've tasked the staff with at this meeting is to spend a bit more time publishing the rationales for our decisions, because everybody wants to know why we've made the decisions we have. And I think we've always taken a lot of trouble to explain ourselves, but I think we could probably do a bit better.
Rod, let me ask you, assuming, let's take a hypothetical here, that the board says in San Francisco at the next public meeting, yes, we're good, go ahead and launch new GTLDs. You're the man in charge of implementation. Is ICANN ready?
Sure, as long as the program is largely as it's been outlined so far and there's not major structural changes to what would be approved by the board, the answer is yes.
You both have said that most of the major issues have been resolved. You're going to meet in February to resolve some of the few remaining issues characterized as minor. What type of issues exactly?
Well, they're not all minor, but there's only the list is smaller than it ever was. One of the issues, for example, is we've been tasked. The community's called on us to do economic studies. And in fact, we've done 5 economic studies. So one of our decisions is we're not going to get any more useful information from further economic studies. What we now need to do is spend a lot of time doing the analysis of those studies. So we're closing off the prospect of further studies. I mean, we could always do more, but we've reached, we think, the point of diminishing returns on that. What we now need to concentrate is on the analysis. Similarly with the other issues, we've done a lot of work in trying to protect the interests of trademark owners. One of the fundamental policy positions when we started this was that the new GTLD program should not infringe the rights of others. And one of the very important rights in that area is the trademark rights. We've spent a lot of time with the trademark community, and we've developed 3 new independent mechanisms for protecting trademark rights on the internet. And so the sense of the board and the sense of the community is that that's probably a sufficient effort in developing mechanisms. What we now might look at is how can we enhance or tweak or improve those processes, but we're not going to convene another process to look at yet another kind of solution for intellectual property rights.
Let me ask both you gentlemen, I don't think it's an overstatement to say after every ICANN meeting there is a certain period of digestion by the community where the community digests the board's actions, the resolutions. Do you foresee at the end of that sort of assimilation of the actions of the board harsh criticism?
No, it's difficult to forecast. I think actually, part of the healthy nature of our multi-stakeholder community is there's a lot of people that have strongly held opinions, and it's often the case that a simple consensus isn't reached, and the board has to make tough decisions. Those often are not popular. So criticism is somewhat par for the course, given the important mandate of the organization and the fact that in many cases these decisions are zero-sum decisions. One party gets what they want and another doesn't. So, and that's why the board is important, to have a body that's been elected from the multi-stakeholder community to make those final decisions.
Rod, we constantly hear the expression multi-stakeholder in the context of ICANN. What does that mean in terms of ICANN's function?
Sure. What it means is that the people that are coming to the table represent different stakeholders from the internet at large, and particularly the domain name industry and the addressing industry. So they have expertise. It means they bring in knowledge, they bring in subject matter expertise, they bring in their financial interest, and they bring in technical acumen and many other capabilities, so that the quality of policies developed is much higher, because the level of the knowledge of the participants is so pointed and so capable. So, and then how do you balance that, and how do you facilitate that process to come out with decisions, policies, and actions that are consistent with the global public interest is the exciting part of the challenge. But that's the real benefit of multi-stakeholder. In one word, it's just expertise.
Let's jump over to .XXX, the other hot issue at this meeting. The resolution which the board approved clearly states the board intends to enter into a registry agreement with the ICM registry for the .XXX sponsored TLD. But once again, the board appears to have kicked this one down the road.
One of the rules at ICANN is that we have to take the advice from governments very seriously. And you'd expect that. This is the governments of the world coming together. Their obligation in ICANN, their commitment to ICANN, is to provide us with advice. They're the Governmental Advisory Committee. They give us advice on matters of public policy of concern to governments, which is their domain. They are the experts in this area. This is an application which they think has raised some issues of public policy comment, and they've given us advice as to what we should do about that application. On the other hand, we get advice from other parts of the community, and we have to take our own advice, legal advice, and various other things. That advice looks like it may be that we are about to depart from GAC advice. Written into the bylaws, we have an obligation, if that's to happen, is do we have to have a good faith and timely consultation with the GAC to try and bridge the gap. It may be that if we get together we can resolve the issues and proceed together. It may be that having gone through that process we can't. At that stage, provided we give our reasons to the Government Advisory Committee about why we're not taking their advice, we're free to move forward on the path that the community has chosen. So that resolution is just part of that process.
Peter, summarize for us, if you will, GAC's feelings about .XXX and the role that plays in the decision-making process.
Well, there's a number of views from different members of the GAC. The GAC hasn't ever reached a unanimous position on that, and has done a number of things. It's asked for further information about how the contractual performance will be guaranteed. It's complained about some other aspects. So there's a range of opinion in the Government Advisory Committee. We think that we'll be able to negotiate with them, get clarity on what the differences between us are, and we'll either come to some compromise on that, or we'll have to choose on this occasion to disagree with the Government Advisory Committee. And I don't have any problem with that as a matter of principle. The principle itself appears in the bylaws, and it's one of the really strong features, and it'll be a sign of the maturation of ICANN, when we can have a disagreement, get over it and move on.
The reality is many people think that ICANN would be afraid not to listen to the GAC. You seem to be indicating that's not the case.
It's not a question of fear, it's a question of making sure that we've taken all relevant views into consideration. It's true that on previous occasions we've taken the advice of the GAC into consideration, and that's largely a testament to the quality of advice that you'd expect as we get from the governments of the world. Every now and then we're going to disagree. It's not because we don't like each other, it's because the community has one view and the governments, who you might expect to be conservative or cautious,
Exactly. If I can contribute to what Peter's saying, we have the Government Advisory Committee, or what we call the GAC. We also have the At-Large Advisory Committee, called ALAC. We already also have the Root Server Advisory Committee, called RSAC. We also have the Security and Stability Advisory Committee, called the SSAC. And then we've got many other constituencies and stakeholder groups. So there's many different voices here. And I think that ICANN has really done its best to balance those voices and to find a constructive consensus in the middle.
It's been stated repeatedly that ICANN considers .XXX as a sort of, for lack of a better word, a test case of its accountability procedures and measures. Is it passing that test?
I think it is. I think, as I said earlier, it's very clear this is an applicant who came forward in a program, was voted down by the board, felt that it had a case to make, went away, used one of our processes to make its case, won that case, has come back and has now gone back into the process again and is moving forward. So that seems to me a perfect example of the processes working in favour of a particular applicant.
Rod, let me pose this question to you. There's been some criticism among people walking the hallways during the Cartagena meeting, questioning ICANN's true commitment to transparency and accountability. What's your response?
Sure, we're extremely committed. Ever since the day that, the moment I signed that contract with the U.S. government, it committed both those parties and the ICANN board, staff, and community to working on the principles of accountability and transparency. And I've started both a top-down effort in the organization, took one of my vice presidents and made her directly an advisor to me, to the CEO, on accountability and transparency, showing my top-down commitment. And then we started a bottom-up process through the organization, and we have dozens of projects and initiatives we've done, one of which we just launched here, which is that we've taken every single board resolution in ICANN history, and believe it or not, there's more than 900, and cited what actions have been taken to fulfill those resolutions and linking related documents. Exactly the kind of thing the affirmation of commitments itself asked for. So I think that we can always get better. Every organization can improve, and we continue to focus on that. And at the same time, though, one has to recognize the tremendous accomplishments of this board, staff, and community and what they've built over the last 12 years.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.